Chit Chat is sponsored by Fun Again Games, where everyone is welcome at our table, and your source for hard-to-find imports, liquidation games, new releases, and much more. Be sure to visit funagain.com to check it out. It's episode 101 of Chit Chat, and we're talking about upkeep and tracking nightmares in games. Some can make your head swim, and others are worth all the mental energy. But we play them all anyway, and we're here to talk about it. Welcome back to Chit Chat. This is episode 101. We're going to spend this episode talking about all the episodes since 100.
Stop.
No.
This doesn't have quite the same ring to it that episode 100 had.
No, it doesn't have quite the same ring, but 101. It almost sounds like...
We should have Dalmatians.
Dalmatians? I was going to go
Sorry,
class.
we forgot our 101 Dalmatians.
I was going to go like accounting 101.
Like Man vs. Meeple 101. Now I feel like we need to rethink the topic and have like a presentation.
Yeah.
Welcome to
our TED
NVM
Talk.
101.
What we're not schooling you on is how to run a video podcast. But tonight we're going to be talking about something that we've all experienced, something that I'm sure everyone listening has experienced too, and that is tracking and upkeep nightmares in games. And some of these aren't nightmares, but
Some of them are nightmares.
tracking and upkeep can often be something that is an issue. If you miss it one round and then the next round someone's going, did I do this? And everyone at the table is like, ugh, no one wants to rewind. So we're going to be talking about some of those in games, and interestingly enough, some of those are in some of my favorite games.
Wow.
Maybe I love upkeep issues. Maybe that's my thing.
Yeah, well, and oftentimes I'll say some of these issues are not enough to ruin a game.
No, they're clearly not, because they are in some of my favorites. Before we get to that, though, we want to talk about game giveaways. This is a good news, bad news scenario. Bad news, we're not going to do a game giveaway this episode. Good news, we are still running the giveaway from our 100th episode, which is a lot of giveaways.
Great news.
One thing that we failed to mention in that episode was when that cutoff was, and a lot of people have asked that since. We are going to cut that off at midnight Eastern Standard Time on July 22nd. That is Friday. If you're watching this live or as it premieres, that's tomorrow night.
You mean Saturday midnight?
No?
The next day, or Thursday midnight?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So technically, Ryan, this feels like an upkeep nightmare right
This
now,
does.
honestly.
Well, I feel like we have this conversation every time somebody says midnight. I'm like, midnight, which one?
At 12 a.m. during the nighttime dark period of this Friday/Saturday. Is
Not
that
the
clear?
nighttime light period.
Well, some people might be watching from Alaska.
That's
I don't know. So anyway, we're going to cut that off this Friday, the 22nd, late at night or early in the morning on Saturday, whichever way you look at it. So make sure and send us emails. If you haven't watched that episode, go back and watch it.
Watch now.
Why are you watching 101?
Yeah, exactly.
You
You're
skipped
watching
one.
out of order. What are you doing? You are an upkeep nightmare. No, but anyway, send us an email to get entered for one of those 10 games, and they were pretty awesome games. But let's talk about upkeep.
Yeah.
Let's talk about upkeep generically first.
Okay.
Because I know that this is a frustrating situation that we've seen, that anyone's seen. Anytime that there's a lot that happens in a game based on like one action. Sure. Like everyone needs to take something, or maybe you have a variable player power that says, if this happens, do this. And we've all been there. 3 turns later, somebody goes, oh, you know what? I didn't get my 2 coins
I haven't been
3
taking...
turns ago. And like, that's like, I don't know. I don't know what to do in that situation ever. I'm like, I guess just take 6 coins. If you say it's been 6 rounds, you haven't been doing it.
Yeah, I generally feel, I'm usually pretty comfortable with letting anyone do that at the table, no matter how long has it been. If it's something they missed, if it's something that if we'd been playing the digital version of the game, that they would have gotten automatically, I'm fine with it. I'm not like a stickler when it comes to like, you forgot, screw you. You're not getting your stuff. But it does get kind of complicated when you yourself have some other variable powers. So you're like, I don't know if are you sure you didn't take them a little bit?
Yes.
Because I kind of remember you taking them once.
And that's my thing. I've done that before in games where I've been like, oh, shoot, I haven't been taking this. I'm just going to take them now. And then later on, I'm like, no, I did definitely take it. Like, because I remember then I spent it for this.
Oh, yeah,
and
that's
I'm
right.
like, oh, shoot, now I've double taken it. Now I take it back. But like, and especially ones where there's a domino effect, right? Where you take something and someone else is like, well, I wouldn't have done this move if I had known you had enough money to do this. And you're like, okay.
That I don't allow. Like if somebody's like, oh, I forgot, my costs are -2. I could have bought this tile 2 turns ago instead.
Oh yeah, if
is too much.
If it's a cascading trail of breadcrumbs that you have to follow back to whatever it was, yeah, that's a little. If it's just like your money pile is going to have more money in it,
yeah, or you get some more resources, or I forgot to get my points at the end of the turn. Sure, take your points.
Yeah, I feel like I'm more of a stickler than either of you, because really, I am very much like, if you didn't remember it, just start remembering it.
I can see Emily getting anxious over there even thinking about it.
I can attest to that. I played a game with her the other day, which we'll probably talk about in a minute, where I had been thinking about this thing I wanted to do. In fact, we both knew that this is the thing I wanted to do. And I, bonehead move, I did another thing.
Who hasn't been there?
One turn. And then after that, I kind of lost track that was the thing I wanted to do. Yeah. And I did something else. And she went, bloop, I'll do that.
I was just like waiting for my moment. I was like, David might mess up. David might mess up. David might. He did. All right.
Now a mess up is not a tracking nightmare. That's just a mess up.
It was a mess up, but it was interesting to her point, being a stickler. I think now, truth be told, had I put on a sob story, I think she would have said, "You can do that."
Yeah. It was a learning game too. So.
But I was like, nope. I'm gonna stick with this because it was a game that's a little brain melty for me. We'll get to that in a little bit. So that is one side of things, kind of like. Would you call that more of the upkeep?
I mean, it depends, because it's both, right? Because tracking things like variable player powers, discounts you're supposed to have, combos that you didn't trigger correctly, but then also upkeep. Some games, and I know you love those games where you have the giant tableau of 100 cards, and you go blah 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 blah
Seasons.
blah.
Seasons is just like that.
But
with
if
all
you
those
miss
cards.
some, you really have to make sure you're getting what you're supposed to be getting when you're triggering like a 20-card upkeep.
Yeah, so when we say nightmares, it's probably an exaggeration because some of these things can be very problematic, but like we said early on, some of these are in some games that I still think are fantastic. Seasons is one of my favorite games. And yeah, when you're playing Seasons, you have a big tableau of cards. Or really, I mean, even something like, Terraforming Mars doesn't have a lot of that.
Ares Expedition, though, does. I was going to say that one, because that one you get a lot more cards. They're just cheaper to get. You can use the cards as money. And yeah, I was playing a game this past week where I was like, oh, I also had a discount there, and I also could have done this here. And like, you just forget because they kind of branch in different paths, so you're not just choosing one thing. You're like, I have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and you forget when you take an action, like, oh, I also now can take one more card or get a science or blah, 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 and then...
Yeah, well, particularly when, in Seasons... It's because it's triggering off of not just something you're doing too, but other people. Like whenever this thing happens in the game. So effectively, you not only have to keep track of all your cards, but those cards for every other player's turn and what they're doing. So you have to be really engaged with what else is happening at the table and not really thinking about your next turn necessarily because you're like, wait a minute, did you do a thing? And if those things in particular... Players don't like to let you take back.
No.
Like if they did something that caused you to get more money, and you go, oh, did you do such and such? Because that gives me more money. You're not only backtracking, but you're also reminding them of like what's probably not the most fun for them is like when you have a card that gives you stuff when they're doing stuff that they're naturally going to be doing. It's like take your money.
I was gonna say Space Station Phoenix. Every action. Give something to somebody. And we were just talking about that because if you're not paying attention, it's like, wait a minute, hold on. How many people took the build action? Because I was supposed to get resources It's like, okay, like there, and it really is for Space Station Phoenix. Every single action has a track.
Yes.
And you're getting stuff, at least
and it
one
depends
or
on
maybe
your
even
positioning on that track too. So it's not just like, oh, now that I'm at this level in track, I'm just going to keep taking this resource. Like if Ryan gets ahead of me, I might not be able to take that resource anymore because I can only take the ones below me. It's so much. You're in the
habit of just taking a certain thing, and then you're like, oh wait, last 2 turns I took this thing I shouldn't have because I'm not ahead anymore.
Yeah, that one has upkeep too, though, where like when you are actually evaluating your space station too, I've had times where I've forgotten like, oh yeah, and now I unlocked this thing, and like I should have also gotten points from here or been able to.
Oh yeah, like all the different abilities you unlock. Still, again, doesn't ruin the game at all. It's just a lot you have to track.
Yeah.
So have there been any games, not that it ruined, but can you think of a game that's like, oh, I never went back to that game too much because of this?
100%.
What is that?
Game?
This is recent, Maglev Metro.
Yeah, I
causes me like, and I get why people love the game, and I see the beauty in the design. For me, it's frustrating because I'm in that. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go here, pick up this person. Oh wait, you can't pick up this person because you don't have this thing. Oh, you went to pick up 2 people. No, last turn you could pick up 2 people, but remember, you shifted your thing, and now you can only pick up 1 person. And it's like, just constant. I feel like every turn I go to do something and realize, oh, that has changed from the last time I did it. And trying to track, because you can always change your train around, like the powers of your train. You can move your robots and you can get different strengths of actions, which is neat because it lets you like prepare for some really big turns. But if you're moving 3 spaces every single turn and then you change it to 1 and you grab the thing and you move it 3 spaces.
Yeah, your muscle memory, your memory of what you've been doing just takes over the fact that like, oh, I made this one little change last time to achieve something else that turn. But then you're just like, oh, I'm going 3 every time, right? No, you're not.
And I'm picking up 2 passengers and dropping off 2 passengers. Not this time.
Yeah, that one hurt my head a little bit because of that. And I would say we're probably, if there's any designers out there watching, they're probably all sitting there like, yeah, welcome to our world. Whenever we introduce a cool little thing that gives players a lot of flexibility and makes a lot of fun for them, it also introduces maybe some of these types of issues.
Yeah.
I think maybe the more you play that game, the easier it gets to just like mentally remember, okay, always look at your makeup before you do your actions. But I've only played it twice, so maybe my brain's not there. But both games, it was just a constant like.
It is definitely something you have to get used to in it, because like that is a game that I do enjoy and I come back to. But you have to, if you don't love that aspect of it, you're never gonna love the game. Like it's like main characteristic of the game is that you have that flexibility, like you said. But it's also like you can't forget what you're giving up every time you make one of those choices. Like there are colors you unlock too for new passengers. And it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, I unlocked pink way long time ago. But then you forgot, oh, then I moved something out of pink. So it's not unlocked anymore because I needed to have more movement. It's really easy to forget, but I love that opportunity cost. If you don't love it though, it's never going to be fun.
Yeah, that's a good example. All these I think are good examples of whenever I play a game like this these days, instead of like complaining about it, my first comment is, oh, a digital version of this would be great. Because it takes care of all that stuff. If you ever played Seasons online, you may never play Seasons at the table again because it just like prompts you every time. Like, oh wait, you have this card, this card, and this card. Do you want to use those right now? Because whatever just happened triggers those. Now on the flip side, sometimes I'll miss that little notification and you're sitting there wondering who's not taking their turn and you look up and, oh, it's reminding me that I needed to trigger that card.
Well, Barrage just came out of BGA, and this is one of my favorite games. I love Barrage, but being able to play it there and like the fact that it does all the math for you constantly, because that's another game that's difficult to track because you're getting bonuses when you're generating power from these dams. You're getting bonuses from all over. You might be getting bonuses from the action, from your player board that you've unlocked, from your powers. It just does all that math for you and just makes tracking.
That's nice.
So I do love digital implementations of games, for sure.
I think it's hard when you start that way, though, because we had, I think, a time that one of our friends played, I think it was Carnegie, online first. And then we played it in real life, and it was one of those times where you're like, wait, what's all going on in between rounds?
I'm used to the game doing this all for me.
Yeah, so like if you do it online first, you're just so used to the upkeep being done for you, and then you're playing it in real life, and you're like, all this moves over here, and I think we get coins, and I think this happens.
I think that's what leads to a lot of people enjoying the online implementation even more than the tabletop. I mean, even though you're not with people, sometimes it's just like, I can get this played a lot more digitally than I can at the table.
So I actually have an example, too, I want to talk about the opposite of Maglev. And that's a game called Clinic, which I don't know if you guys have played Clinic.
I have not.
The tracking is a nightmare, but it's also the tracking is like the puzzle of the game. Because you're operating this clinic, this hospital, and you're bringing in doctors and nurses and patients, and they all come, and they all bring their cars, and you have to park their cars, and you have to have space for all the cars, and it's like a whole spatial puzzle.
That is an interesting aspect to that
game. It
game.
is, but if you forget, it can really mess you up. Like, you'll stop and look at somebody's board and be like, hold on, you have like 10 pieces on your board, and you have 5 cars in your parking lot. Like, you're 5 cars short, and then they realize, oh, I don't have room for 5 more cars. I couldn't have taken... And then by that point, it's like, but that's the puzzle of the game, right? Like that's inherent to the puzzle of the game is like trying to find spots to park everybody, which seems kind of silly. Like that's, but it's a big part of operating your clinic.
That's interesting because I can't think of a specific example, but that is a good example of games out there that add an extra layer to what is normally a very natural process. Like something like Seasons or Bruges, where you're playing, most games, you're like, oh, I'll add this card to my tableau, I'll add this card to my tableau. But in Seasons and Bruges, you have to make spots for those cards in your tableau. And that's I've seen that happen a million times where you look down and you're like, how did you get so many cards played? And I'm like, when did you do the unlocking of the spaces? And they're like, what?
Well, I make that mistake in Lorenzo sometimes because you can only play a certain number of production cards until your military value gets higher.
Yeah, that's
and
sort of thing.
You're like, how do you have all of your card spots full? You have like 5 military, and it's like, oh shoot. And yeah, that can break the game, but mistakes happen like that.
It is tricky because like in something like that, you're looking down and they even have the spaces for your cards.
Right.
So it feels like, well, I just fill these. Right. I can just fill these spaces, right?
Sure. The icon is there. You just have to be paying attention to it.
Yeah, that is interesting. Emily, do you have any games in particular where tracking
or
upkeep?
I was thinking of Bitoku, and the reason I say Bitoku is because it has the little like income bonuses that you can get, and it also has the bonuses next to cards. And those are things that every time I play it, I forget about. And like I get so excited about like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take this thing and it's gonna give me this bonus every round. And then when we do the round, I inevitably forget. And then so we're like halfway through the next round when I'm like, oh yeah, I should also have this resource. And it's one of those times because I'm such a stickler that I'm like,
nope, can't do it.
Like I don't want to take it, but I know it's not going to really affect anybody else. But also like if someone was looking around and thinking, oh, she won't go there because she doesn't have that resource. And now I suddenly have the resource where I could. I'm like, I don't want to affect the game like this.
And that's another one too, where you own buildings, and if somebody uses your building, you'll get something. And it's like if you're nice, you'll tell somebody, hey, I'm using your building. Don't forget to take your thing.
Yeah.
But you might not be paying attention and like, wait, how long ago did you use my building? I never took that resource.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, did you just take it and spend it already? That was like five moves ago, right? So you have to be paying attention. Any kind of game like that, you have to pay attention.
Well, and I think the in-between rounds, too, is like you're going through these different seasons, the way it explains it, which is always difficult for me to remember what's supposed to be happening. Like, I'm taking new cards, I'm choosing my next cards, but I'm also getting resources. I just feel like I always get slipped up on...
the process of
it. Like, it spells it out, but it's just like, I still feel like I skip steps.
That's another thing. The process is, Messina, 1347, that game... If we've talked about this before, but the process in that, again, very easy to follow if you follow it.
To the letter.
And you have to really kind of slow down. And I think that's one of the themes I see across all these games is a lot of games that are built with a pacing that's fun and moves quickly, but has some of these things, it makes it more difficult to catch those things when you're like, okay, let's move. And in Messina, that process that you go through, particularly like we ran into it where people at the table are like, well, I'll help put those new tiles out. And like, that just hold on for a second because we got to do this in order because there are things that if you do out of order will be done incorrectly. Like you have to do this and finish that first because it has some impact on how you're doing
this. Right, because like in Messina, if people are still alive in plague zones, they go away.
Yeah.
And then new people come out. So if somebody's putting the new people out before the old ones are away, you're like,
which ones were here?
Right, which ones were already here? But Messina, like you said, breaks it down in that really smart way. And I think that's another thing with these games that have a lot of upkeep is if you have like 20 steps that have to be taken, you need a player aid. We saw that with Messina. We saw that with Siege of Vienna, which we played not too long ago. If we didn't have that player aid, I wouldn't seriously have messed up that game.
No, and in most of those cases, those player aids, probably because they have to be, are incredibly thorough and well done. But they're done that way for a reason. So because if you don't follow them at all, you're probably bound to miss something.
But then there's games that don't, and that's where the problem is. Games where you have to go back to the rule book and be like, wait a minute, let me make sure we didn't skip anything during this like refresh phase because there's so many things that are getting refreshed. And there's some games, especially where it's like, okay, well, this card goes away and this refreshes, but these cards down here don't go away. They don't refresh. And so it's like trying to remember all of those different things.
Yeah, we had that in one of the games we just recently played too, right? I was going to say in Skymines.
Oh, Skymines.
Where the cards refresh and we were like, oh, they all should have gone away, the final row.
Yeah, we did miss that step a couple times. And you realize those sometimes too. If you're someone who plays lots of board games, after a few rounds, you're like, we're not really getting through this deck very much.
Yep.
Oh, that's right. And it made a huge difference because we were like ditching 4 cards and
they get better. They get progressively better. So you're like, oh, finally we're getting to the better cards.
Yeah, which made a huge difference. So we'll have to play that again with the right rules. One other game we played recently, and this is sort of a little different, but it was one of those little upkeep things. And this is one, I still love the game, but if you mess this up, it could have a significant impact on the game itself, and that's Ginkopolis.
Yeah.
Because in Ginkopolis, there's this one step and if you've ever played it on the table, you'll probably agree, is when you build something, they have these little crane pieces, and you put the little crane piece on your card. It doesn't really serve any purpose other than being a reminder for when you have to reshuffle the deck that you add the corresponding card to the tile you just built. Because if you don't, then it really messes the game up quite a bit, because you need all the tiles that are on the board, you need those in the deck, because those are the cards you use to use those tiles that are on the board. So if someone put a tile out at some point in the game and said, oh, I can't wait to use this, get that card and potentially tap this. But then no one puts that card in. I think a couple of the games I've played of Ginkgopolis, at the end, we realized we missed some of those. And then we'd look in the deck and look at the tiles that were out on the table and go, oh my God. There's 5 cards in here that we never added to the deck. It was to the point where you and I were troubleshooting, like, is there a better way to do this?
I know, and the thing is that it's one of those things where, like, the designer had to be like, okay, we'll put in these cranes so people won't forget how to do it. And it seems so simple. You're like, yeah, I put down a card, I put a crane on it. Not that hard to remember. But somehow when you're playing it, you're like, what? Crane what? Like, and you look down and you're like, oh, nothing has cranes on it. This can't possibly be right.
I did come up with something since we talked about that. I want to hear you. So if you've played Ginkgopolis, follow along. If not, just fast forward a couple minutes. I thought that when you play cards, because in the Ginkgopolis you play a card, and sometimes or oftentimes you play a card with a tile.
Yes.
That play necessarily means that you're adding a tile to the tableau, to the world,
card to the deck,
which means that you're necessarily putting a crane on it. I think when you place your card and your tile down, get a crane right then. And put it on the tile. That way you'll never forget, because it's super easy to forget. Because once you play the card and you're doing your turn, you're so consumed with all the things you're doing for you on your turn, that is a very easy
because the crane's not for you. The crane is for the entire table. It's not really like something you're considering.
But that we'll try that next time.
For sure.
See if it works.
Sure.
So you had said earlier too, or we had said that like tracking issues don't ruin games, and in fact, I want to point out, like, I'm not exempt from that, because one of my favorite games, Marvel Champions, has
a fair bit,
has a lot of tracking. And I know you've said, like, that's why you like to play with me, because for me
it's like playing on BGA.
Anymore.
Ryan is a computer, because I'm sitting there and he's like, and I'm like, okay,
but
good.
I'll
just trust it.
Even with me,
he gives you notifications. It's your turn, David.
Right.
I've played so many games of Marvel Champions, but it's still so easy to forget, because every scenario is so different, and you add in like these different, side schemes come out, and this one might have a little thing that says, if this happens, then this happens, and you might go 3 turns and realize, oh, I wasn't doing the if this happens, that happens part. And like, sometimes you feel like maybe you got off a little easy because you forgot to trigger some of that stuff sometimes.
Yeah, I would say, not even Marvel Champions, but I have more experience with Arkham Horror, the card game.
There's a lot there too.
And I've come to the conclusion that to play those and have fun with them consistently, you've just got to realize and accept, I'll make mistakes.
Right, sure.
I'm not going to beat myself up too much at the end for for missing something, because I would think of all the games I've played of Arkham Horror with Alicia, guaranteed we probably screwed up 3 to 5 different things during each play. But it's all right. It wasn't a big deal. And oftentimes when you screw up in those games, at least in Arkham Horror, you're often coincidentally screwing up to help you.
Well, yeah, Marvel Champions is the same way.
You're never punishing yourself, because the game's already so punishing.
Oh, shoot, I forgot this guy's supposed to get +1 attack for his last 5 attacks.
Yeah, there are things you want to forget.
Right.
One thing we haven't talked about with tracking is, I think a big one too, is when you play games at different player counts. So one I'm thinking of that's like an easier game. So The Crew, I played with my sister at 2 players, and you play with an AI. And every time when you set it up, you have to make sure that the rocket, the 4 rockets, is who's going to be captain. You can't give it to the AI. You have to give it to either you or the other person actually playing, right? So, but if you're used to playing The Crew at higher player counts, you're like just dealing out the whole deck like usual. My sister and I were sitting down to play this game, and we played like at least 10 rounds, and every single time would forget to take out that 4 of rocket ship. So we'd like look at each other and be like, you the captain? You the captain? No, dang it. We have to reshuffle and do the deck again. And like for The Crew, that's not a big deal. But I think for longer or heavier games, that can be a big thing where it happens, where at the end of the game, you're like, was this space supposed to be covered? Or like, was this really balanced for 2 player? And then you look in the rules and you're like, oh shoot, yeah, there was a slight difference.
I've been guilty of that, of like, I've played the 2-player version at one point, but then I mostly played at 4, and I think, I remember the 2-player, and then I realized this feels weird. Oh, here's this one extra step you're supposed to do only in a 2-player game.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like I think those should be like red stamped in a rule book, big red things that says if this is different in a 2 or 3-player game. Do not forget to do this. That's why I like rule books that like color code. Like this is a 2-player rule. This is a solo rule. And so if you're looking through the rule book and you say, oh, all the green sections are just for 2 players, all the red sections are just for if you're playing solo. That really helps with that tracking what you're supposed to do in those different versions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's our thoughts on tracking and upkeep and just general nightmares during games. Make sure to comment below with your tracking and
I'm
and
sure there are a
upkeep
lot
games
of
did we
games out
forget?
there like this.
Yeah.
I'm sure we
there
forgot
are a
some.
lot.
I was like going through the list before we started recording, thinking like, what ones could I talk about? And there's even some recent ones that we'll be talking about in a second here that we've been playing, like Skymines, and others, where there are some things you can miss. And I've just not that they ruin the game, but that you just want to make sure and point out to everyone, okay, this is the one thing that we'll all forget, so let's try not to forget
That's
it.
what I want to know. Let me know too, because I want to see what the number one thing that people forget is. What is the game with like the most forgettable step? Like that people are always like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, like we miss it every single time we play. I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm curious too. Yeah, answer his question. That's good. I really want to know that because I think once we all see it, we'll go, oh yeah.
Yeah, or somebody's gonna go, oh, didn't even know that was a rule. I've never played with that. I've had that happen.
I've had that happen to me. So what have we been playing? We've already mentioned a couple things. Emily
Skymines.
Skymines. We've played a lot.
We played Old London Bridge.
Oh, that's right.
From Queen Games, which was like a little... You compared it to Nidavellir, and I see some of that as far as like the drafting goes. Like you're bidding on drafting these buildings to add to your bridge, and it looks really cool when it's done.
When it's built.
We didn't play with like variable scoring, which is like more like the advanced mode. I think a game like Old London Bridge, which is maybe geared towards a more like I don't want to say gateway.
It's a light game.
It's a lighter game. For
I think
sure.
I really want to play with that advanced scoring, but
yeah.
But that was a lot of fun, and then I finally played Unfathomable for the first time.
For the first time.
For the very first time, we played it over at a game day a couple weeks ago, which was pretty funny, because our friend who was the cultist,
that's right,
actually won the game for us by doing a ritual that knocked out all the enemies. And we were also confused, and we asked her, like, why did you help us win? And she said, well, I was doing it so you'd trust me, so that later I could betray you. And that was the end of the game.
And there wasn't any later.
There was no later. I was like, this is the moment you should have
To be fair, though, it was
us.
her first time playing it too. So I think she thought, like, okay, it's going to ramp, and I'm going to gain their trust, and then I'll show them. And you guys were like, and we won.
Yeah.
And she's like, dang it.
It is hard. It is hard to get away from that sometimes in games where you're like, okay, I have this plan.
Yeah.
I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And then if you've never played it, you're like, you're not really certain when that game ends.
Right, you don't know the pacing of it. Yeah.
So you're like, but I really want to fool them by doing this.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, what she was going after there was like, oh, I did gain their trust. What a great move. But it was...
Like in Don't Mess with Cthulhu, that's huge. Because once you have their trust, you're like, David, bounce back and forth with me. And then you get that moment I reveal Cthulhu and I see that expression in your face. That's a great moment.
Yeah. Which, we won't bore you with more Don't Mess with Cthulhu stories, but we did play that again. I was at CharCon recently down in West Virginia. We played it with, again, some people who had never played it, and some of that same exact stuff happened where someone was outed as a cultist because they said they didn't have any of the signs, and then they went to them and they flipped a sign, and someone at the table said, come back to me and we'll just go back and forth. I'm the other cultist. And it was a large player count too, which generally speaking, I've not enjoyed large player counts, but I think I know why. It's because typically when I've played large player counts of that game, usually it's kind of a larger group of people who don't necessarily all know each other really well.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But this in particular, we were at CharCon, Blue Peg, Pink Peg was there. It was a big group of people. We were playing 8 players.
Oh, wow.
And it was all people who know each other pretty well.
That's
cool.
It makes it more fun.
Jab each other and like have fun with each other. So it definitely made it a lot more fun.
That's fun. Did you play anything else there at CharCon?
I did. I played Marrakesh. CharCon is organized by Travis Reynolds from Queen Games down in West Virginia. And we had Marrakesh here, as you know, playing it. on the stipulation that I had to get it back to him before CharCon, which we just decided, you know what? Blue Peg Pink Peg's going to be there. We can see some friends. We'll just drive it down there and return it. It gave us more time to play it, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm glad about.
Yeah.
So played Marrakesh there. We also played Marrakesh a couple weeks ago at that same event where you played Unfathomable. Marrakesh is, if you haven't seen the content that we have up on the channel already,
check it out.
We have an overview, sort of a tour of Marrakesh by me and Emily. Alicia and I also recorded a round 1, which will be up very soon too, but probably after you're watching this. Marrakesh is probably quickly becoming one of my favorite felds.
Well, it's a great feld. It's
like,
a great game. Period.
I don't know that I want to say that I'm going to like it better than Castles of Burgundy, because
I can say that.
Castles of Burgundy is like got this place in my heart too.
Sure.
It's got some points there. But I will say this. I've never had more fun playing a feld game.
I don't know what fun.
As much fun as you could ever have playing a board game.
I don't mean that sarcastically, but like the turn-to-turn, round-to-round satisfaction and fun that you can get.
I would call that just regular fun.
No air quotes, just fun.
Yeah, but there's some games that are like hardcore competitive games.
Fun.
You guys have fun with. I do not have fun with those.
I don't think that Marrakesh is like that, though.
No, it isn't. But
There's some hate drafting, though, for sure.
Yeah, but even that part is fun, and the reveal, and you're dumping those pieces in the tower, and you're like, what's coming out? That it's exciting.
Like
I guess
4 pieces come out, and everybody just
there's a
their hands in the air.
level. There's a level of excitement in the game that I don't see in many other games. Period. Let alone any Feld games.
No.
So if you want to learn about it, watch our other content on there. But we played that. And speaking of tracking issues, there's a couple things in that.
Yeah.
As much as we all love that game,
yeah.
There's a little thing. You can have the water vendors that are little pieces in the one of 9 different areas that you might fire off. And if you have a water vendor, you get a free water. And sometimes
very simple, very little thing.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's
but
easy.
because it's so simple, you forget every time, and then you're like 3 turns later, you're like, oh, I should have 3 more water. I have vendors in each of these spaces, and we're like, okay, sure.
You've got a lot of other things on your mind when you're taking your turn, so it's easy to miss that. And then the pacing of this game is so fast because the game can take a while at 4 players.
Sure.
But it never feels that long.
No.
And because the pacing moves along so quickly, there's a part at the end of every single round where you look at the river to see if people have crossed these bonus spaces, and you get a bonus. Mm-hmm. The number of times we've realized in the next round, oh, did we get our bonuses up here? Because part of it is that, the first round, maybe no one crossed any of those bonus spaces, so there's nothing. Maybe even the second round. But then once people start doing it, you just need to get used to, kind of like Messina style, get used to tracking that. But yeah, Marrakesh, fantastic game.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our play of it. I just want it to come out so that we get a lot more plays in of it, because I want to see how the different strategies go. Like when you and I played, you played hard into the river.
I'm a big river guy.
And you were like, I would never play this not doing river. And I was like, I wonder if you could win not doing river. And then when we played together, you won and you didn't do like pretty much any river.
That's right. You didn't do a river at all.
You have to choose one. I think you just have to choose one to not do. And be like, I'm just not doing this. Because if you try to do all of them, you're going to do all of them halfway.
You're gonna fail,
so I was just, early on, you guys all were like trying to race up that river track. I was like, I'm not even, there's no way.
You filled spaces on the board is what you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was what I made my goal. I tried to fill as many little of the action spaces. And I like that. That's my favorite thing about the game, is how the actions power up based on the number of people you have there. And adding those people is just very satisfying.
Yeah. I think that's a sign of a good game for me, in my opinion, is when you can take different strategies and different plays and still have a really rewarding experience and still a fun experience.
Well, and it makes you go, oh, well, next time I do kind of want to go up the river track.
Yeah,
because I didn't go up it at all last game.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's also dependent on, for instance, what those river tiles might be.
Sure.
Because some of the river tiles are very compelling, and you get those if you're furthest up on the river. Sometimes they're not. When we played at CharCon, there was a player who went pretty heavy on the scrolls, which is the one area we thought, that's kind of challenging because some of those scrolls are not accessible really early on.
They're pretty costly.
But we had a couple scrolls that allowed you to kind of cheat that and get one of the 7s maybe earlier and stuff like that.
Oh, that's nice.
And he did pretty well with the scrolls by utilizing some of those powers, and he also went up both of the palace and the mosque. Yeah. I know we're talking about this game like we just explained it to you. So if you don't understand Marrakesh, do check out our video because you'll have a very thorough understanding of it.
What else have you played, Emily?
Skymines was the other one that we played, and I really enjoyed it. I had never played, so it's a re-theme of Mombasa, which I had never played before. But David had told me he thinks I'd like it because it has similar mechanics to Blackout Hong Kong, and I do like that one a lot. And it's kind of similar in the way you're playing cards. But I really enjoy the planning aspect that comes with it, because you're not just planning what I'm going to do this round, but you really have to keep in mind how that's going to set you up for your next round of cards, and even the round after that. And then in the round, the timing matters too. Like, I want to take this bonus before David can take this bonus, or like I want to take this action before David can take this action, because we're kind of fighting for different things. And we only played it at 2, but I'm sure at 4 it's going to feel even stickier, where you're like...
Yeah, the decisions you're making on your turn, like you said, even at 2, you're either generally utilizing one of the cards you have in front of you, or placing one of those bonus pieces to take just basically some ongoing bonuses per round to just give you a thing. And the decision making of like, if I don't take this bonus now, she might take it, because you qualify for some of the bonuses. So sometimes you can look and go, okay, well, she's not getting that or that or that, so I can wait on those bonuses.
Yep.
But then there's some other bonuses that give you like a little tweak on your next round.
Right.
Those are the ones that you don't want to mess up.
Well, and then if you're thinking like, oh, David's not going to go for it because he's doing this round already, so I'll just do that later. And then he goes for it, and you're like, dang it, David, now you screwed up my next round, and I don't know what I'm going to do instead, so I'm going to try to find a different route to get there. And it does have different routes to do things, so you have a lot of flexibility in that, but it's so much thinking on planning what you're doing right now, when you're doing it, and what you're doing next turn, and all of it marrying together.
Yeah, a lot of little puzzles to solve. I mean, there's a lot of things that are informing those decisions. One of the things that I think maybe got a little too caught up on, you take these research tiles and put them on this track on your player board. Then you have to move up that track. And moving up that track, you're fulfilling the top part of each of those research things, which is heavily reliant on the cards that you're playing.
Yep.
So the cards that you're taking, the way you're discarding those cards, and how you're going to get them cycled back into your hand all plays into how well you can move up that track. And I appreciate that. I respect it. I suck at it. No, I still do really love the game.
Was it fun, though?
Yeah. No, it was. I did have a lot of fun playing it, but I don't know that I would never be competitive. If I sat down and played it with you guys in your gaming group, I'd be like, nah. I'm just not doing it.
I think our gaming group's going to like it a lot.
Yeah,
though.
I think all of your gaming group will like it quite a bit. Would you say that's a heavier...
Yeah. I mean, most of Pfister's games are pretty heavy.
Yeah, but like unlike the Boone Lakes, Maracaibos, and Great Western Trails of the world, this and Blackout Hong Kong definitely melt my brain a little bit more.
I'd put it right along where Great Western Trail is.
Really?
Honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
I would definitely put this one higher than Great Western Trail.
The planning in this one hurts my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, so before we go, though, I do want to talk about a game that I think is just pure fun.
Do it.
Maybe the most fun I've had playing a game. I finally got into the Marvel Snap beta.
I did.
This is something David and I have been talking about trying to get into for, months.
I know, and I signed up before you.
Who
did. This game is so much fun. This is a digital-only card game developed by some of, or maybe even all of the designers of Hearthstone came over to design this Marvel Snap game. It's super quick. It's like a 6-round card game, but it uses that app. So, first of all, no tracking.
No upkeep.
No upkeep, no nothing. But second of all, it lets you do things in games you cannot do on the tabletop.
Yeah.
Like play cards that change the cards in your deck, or that change the cards in your hand, or that turn cards into other cards, or just crazy things that happen. And everything is like designed for me, right? Because it's all Marvel stuff. It's characters that I love from Marvel, and seeing them come out, and their abilities are very thematic, and the game is fast-paced. All the animations are very cool. The sound effects. I'm sorry, David. You could come over and play it sometime.
It makes me so sad that you got in and I have not yet gotten into that beta.
Well, it should be coming out, I mean, in the relative near future, it should be coming out to everybody. It'll be Android, iOS, and I think eventually even like a PC.
Yeah, I think they're going to do it on Steam, but the mobile one is first. And we will, I can't imagine that we're not going to stream this or do some content on the channel, even though it's digital.
It's addictive. It's super addictive.
It looks really good. But like Ryan was telling me the other day that in its current state, at least on the emulator that he's using,
I don't have
it plays slowly a little.
I don't have an Android device. I'm thinking about getting an Android device just to play this better. They're not that expensive right now.
She's got one. You gonna let us borrow your Android device?
No.
I mean, you can get an Android tablet for pretty cheap these days. So
yeah, you can.
Something that just to run Marvel Snap, so that I could stream it and run it a little smoother. I mean, eventually the iOS version will come out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing that for sure.
It's so good. I mean, it's so good.
So those are the games we've been playing. Those are the comments we have on Upkeep and tracking. If you have any comments on any of those, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and talk to you. Or if you're watching this live, we're probably already talking to you.
And also, if you're watching this live, don't forget to go back and enter into all of the games you could win for the top 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, and lastly, if you're not watching this live, watch it live. It's fun. Like, there's live comments. We're in there talking to everybody.
It is a good time.
A lot of good time. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then. Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.